All right, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another session of Radical Talks. This time we have the most excellent Kassy LaBorie. Now, I first heard of Kassy, oddly enough, through her books. Now, full confession, as an ATD member, we're allowed 2 free books as members a year. One of the free books that I got as we switched over to this was Kassy's, so I downloaded that, which is Interact and Engage. She co-authored that, and it's fantastic. What it's nice about it is, I'll be honest, you go through ATD books, these tenure books, half of them you're just paging through, you're like, yep, I've seen that before, I've seen that before. With Kassy's, like every other page, I sat there going, why didn't I think of that? And so it's just these small little things where you go, why didn't I think of that? And even just last week, there was a great session she did online. Well, at least the ideas were great. The technology, a little iffy sometimes, but activities for spectacular live online training. And there was this incredible quote that she has in her handouts, which says, it's the trainer's mantra, which I absolutely love. What did I just say that you could have said? And what did I just do that you could have done? And I've never seen a more apt way of putting what should be truly learner-centered focus than that. When are we as trainers taking the voice away from our learners and the actions away from our learners, and rather than giving it back to them? And so, of course, having seen that, read that, I had to invite her on, and she's been nice enough to come join us, even though she has done, let's see, hundreds of conferences and talks all this time. Without further ado, thank you very much for joining us, Kassy. It's a long
Thank you
intro.
so much. Oh my gosh, no. Can I bring you with me wherever I go?
Well, at 11 p.m., the intros do get a little bit longer as the
That's
brain
great.
flies through. So thanks so much for joining. So how are you doing these days?
I'm great. I am working all the time, which is incredible. My mom finally understands what I do after 2 decades, so that's good.
Oh, yeah, because it's finally up there. Oh, so this is what you're doing. Yeah,
This
I
is
have actually
it.
had,
Yeah.
my parents have definitely both nudged into the fact when I do some of the public sessions there, they're like, oh, I might sign up for it. And I'll see in the
Right.
background, I'm like, oh, I know who that is. So it's like, oh, thanks, mom.
It's
So it's always
adorable.
good fun.
It is.
So
It's really fun. Hmm.
it is. It's actually, it's kind of joyful. So like in the last couple of months, what is actually in terms of online facilitation? You've obviously been in the space for quite some time, thinking about it a great deal, but we've seen so many people who are coming here just for the very, very first time. So I'm kind of curious for those who are just joining on, what would be your best advice to them? I mean, what would be your approach? Because there's a lot of people who are truly terrified of this. 4 or 5 months in, they're beginning to get used to it, but there's still that kind of feeling. What are the
Hmm.
mistakes we make when we move from face to face to virtual?
I think the biggest mistake is we think it's different, like 100% different, a whole new
Mm,
world, when really, if we can just focus on what we always do, what do we love about getting to be a trainer, getting to be a facilitator or a presenter, and try to recreate that here in some kind of way. I mean, you have to learn the technology, of course. I think, but we make the mistake of thinking this is such a different world. That's all
mm,
new, and it isn't that much different in terms of connecting with people. People still, want things to be applicable. They still want to have a good time. They want to be able to connect with other people. They want it to make sense and not be a waste of time. All those things remain the same. And I think that maybe we're overthinking it. And then the second thing, which goes on to that, is that I think we think the technology is going to be easier to use than it is.
yeah.
I mean, the
Um,
technology is pretty easy to use today. I mean, roll it back 20 years, and I was like terrified every time I clicked on start. But now it's so easy to use. But it's not. It's not just click and everything will be fine. I'm in my car. I'm on the way to the park.
yeah,
Uh,
it's not so easy that it disappears, and that's what we wanted to do, to be learner focused, as you say. As this idea that just human to human connection. Tyagi had this great quote that, quite simply, we should just trust our participants. We really need to just put our faith in them.
yes.
And
That's so much, so much.
yeah,
That's where that quote comes from. I'm so glad that you quoted me on that. What did I just do that I could have let you do? What did I just say that you could have said?
mm,
It occurs to me all the time. I put things together and then I go back and look at it and go, why did I say all that? I could,
yeah,
that we need to, and like the part about Tiagi saying trusting them, for me, where that comes into play is I think we set the bar too low.
mm,
Let's set the bar higher because people live up to higher
exactly,
expectations if we let them
exactly.
have it. People go, I can't let them use the chat. They might get confused. And I'm like, actually, they're going to be okay. Let's let
Yeah,
them use the
exactly.
chat. And when they say I'm overwhelmed, say, that's okay. It gets better rather than, oh, don't worry. Let me take it away from you.
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree there. But the easiest thing, like, because I obviously like using way too many platforms, probably. Um, we do want the tech to disappear in the background, so it
Mhm.
becomes about that, yeah, human to human thing. But as long as we remove any of the shame and blame associated with the tech, so they don't start turning back on you, and
That's a
simply
good
say, hey, things are going to break. So I'm about to take you somewhere. All you got to do is click the button. You don't have to do anything else. If things break, if things blow up, don't worry. It's not you. Trust me, it's the technology.
Oh,
And
I couldn't agree with you more because guess what? It does break. And so
all the
what?
time.
So
So
what?
what?
I remember, I don't even know what was the context for this. I don't know. It might have been just some sort of I'm trying to make change some kind of habit. And I
Mm,
remember my husband saying, "Oh, if you drop your phone, do you not? Is that the end of it? You don't pick it up and keep using it?" I dropped my phone. That's it. No more phone.
yeah,
No, we don't do that. You pick it up and you dust it off and you go, it's okay. And then you try again, you know,
yeah, exactly. It's a
great. It
growth
didn't
process
crack.
there.
Excellent.
Well, the
So,
satisfaction when people get it
mm,
is
mm.
always incredible, as long as they feel that there's a purpose to why we're using it, where it's not just technology for technology's sake. There's nothing better than, oh, I'm using this just because it's fancy, shiny, and new. Like all those touch boards that got put into all those schools all over
Yeah.
the place, and then were used for about 5 minutes by teachers, and then gathered dust in the corner.
I mean, I hate to say it, Joshua, but I sort of think polling is like that.
It is. It's
I put a whole bunch of
so
polls in my
meaningless.
class. It was engaging.
Oh God.
It's funny.
Polling is the equivalent of your check-in being, are there any questions? Do you understand? That's honestly what
Great.
polling is the
No.
equivalent of.
Yeah. I know. I
Yeah,
love that.
it's
Are there any questions? And then they don't know how to tell you like raise hand, green check. They don't know where that stuff is because you
mm,
didn't prompt it. And then when there's nothing, you go, great, great. Thanks for no questions. Let's move on. You know, like
exactly,
trying to coach that out
exactly,
of everybody.
exactly. Which is
You
just
don't
it
realize
doesn't
you do
really
it,
mean it.
you
Yeah,
know.
no, one of the more revealing softwares I was using recently, oh goodness, so I think it's macro.io, which is it's a layer that goes on Zoom calls, and it's
Okay.
actually tracking who is speaking. So it's a free software that's right. So as a facilitator, so I'm using it in my coaching sessions just to see, am I getting into too much coach talk? It's if we truly want to be learner centered. And I got to like halfway through a coaching session, I'm like, looking at the numbers there, I'm like, I am talking too much. I didn't even realize it, but oh my God, I need to shut up. So yeah. So I guess there is a lot of tech change, and you have been at the forefront of this. Like Interact and Engage, it's one of the few books where it's virtual facilitation and training principles, but it also has a really interesting section on advanced features. But it was written a couple of years ago. I'm kind of curious, actually, what you think about now. What's come out in the last year or two that actually excites you? Not just ooh, that's neat and shiny, but could really actually begin to change conversations.
There are so many new things that have come out
Mm,
in the last even just in the last year, and, I think I actually feel quite excited about what Zoom is doing and also what Teams and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I like what Teams is doing too, simply because as soon as we got away, like the WebExes and the Adobes, I love them, don't get me wrong, and I like uploading. In my new book, I talk about how WebEx and Adobe are like what I call well, Adobe is like a builder type
mm,
platform, where Zoom and Teams is more like a revealer platform. You know, you can't like upload everything in advance, but in the moment once you open it, you can reveal all sorts of things. And I think that has done is that for those of us using WebEx and Adobe, we're becoming more open to sharing our desktop, which we were sort of resistant to if you roll it back several years. Like upload everything, make it all ready, present. And now
yeah.
with something like the Zooms and the Teams and all these different apps, even in just talking with you in the beginning of our conversation, there's all these different apps, which is opening the world up to all kinds of other creative things that can happen because we're sharing our screens to do different things where we can collaborate in different ways. And we're not limited by what just the Zoom will do or what just the Teams will do. Um, and I'm still working through that myself because there's an element of becoming overwhelmed pretty quickly there. And I don't want to like over tech everybody because I do very
True.
much believe that we want to keep it on the person and the people and what we're here to do. But sometimes, you know, as we know, these technologies let us do things differently and in ways that we
Yeah.
hadn't imagined.
We want to keep
And
that
I'm excited about
curiosity.
it. Hmm.
Yeah, it is exciting. It's that always learning. It's always funny if we as facilitators don't want to keep learning, but we expect our learners to want to have that curiosity. It's so
It's
it's
so
it's always being curious about how we can actually interact better. I
true. Hmm.
guess when people are moving to virtual, like So your tips are great so far. I guess just specifically around like conversations, around how do we actually shape deeper conversations in a virtual
Yeah.
space? Is there any suggestions you've got specifically around that? Because you talk about mapping interactions to tools in your recent webinar you gave. It was
Hmm. Hmm.
you had that really nice quote about, oh, we need to basically map the tools to the interactions and really think about it in a much more pragmatic, a much more systematic way. So I'm just
It's like the
curious.
final step, though. Like the first step is
Mm,
what are you doing, and remain clear about that. And so again, thank you, IDs, instructional designers, for all you do, making us better.
yes,
We just need to
so
listen to
true.
them more, right? So, uh, yeah. So first, be very clear about what you're doing, and then when you know what you're doing, select those objectives that are meant to be completed with other people, and focus
Mm,
on what it feels like to be together, and the kind of things that we can do as a result of being together. And then you look at your technology and tool to see how we use that to be together and to work together and work through that. And I think we do focus so much on the tech, we focus so much on just making it all work, that we do forget, listen, how do we just connect here? How do we relate to one another? How do we have human interaction through this technology
we
in ways that
rush.
are meaningful? And then once we do that, and that's where I always love to focus with all new virtual presenters and
Mm,
trainers. Like, let's talk about people first, because I know the tech is overwhelming and I know that you need to learn it and be great at it. You do. But first, let's talk about why you're here and what you're doing, and get back to that drive and that passion that you have, and then help people be here authentically, um, and with, like, let's focus on how people feel, right? How are they feeling when they connect, and are you making it comfortable for them to want to learn here, to want to be here? Do they find you credible? Are they ready to learn from you and from one another? And certainly that's wound up in the tech, but it's probably just like first and foremost, like people skills, and
no,
learning how to translate people skills via technology.
no, and to be honest, that sounds spot on. I'm just curious. Um, Related to that, I mean, you've got your online virtual facilitator certificate program. I'm wondering if conversations around that, if anything, has actually surprised you, because a bunch of people, obviously, in the last couple of years, a bunch of people have been going through that program, working with you on that kind of stuff. Have any of the questions from the humans in those actual sessions surprised you, where you're like, ah, you know what, I hadn't thought about that. We should have a better answer for that. Like, what's actually surprised you from all the people you've been training through that, in terms of where they've come from?
Hmm. I think what continues to surprise me is how people forget everything they love about what they do
Mhm.
because of the technology. And they I'm surprised that they are surprised by the simplicity of of what we do in learning and development. Of, like, I guess like I guess an example of that is, we're so wound up in how do I share my screen, and does it look right, and I can't see this, and how do I sound, that when I very simply say, let's just talk to each other, and I understand you just had a birthday, and they're like, how did you remember that? you and they have this moment of, oh wait, we're just here, we're just
We're
people, and
people.
we're
Yeah.
connecting, and they forget about the whole thing that maybe brought them into what they're doing today anyway.
Mm.
And I think I don't know why I continuously get surprised by it, but I do. And maybe you were looking for more of a technical answer, but I
No.
I tend to always go more towards the people.
Well,
And
no, I think you're right, though. I mean, to go in that direction, for me, like the gradual shift over the last 10 years has been giving up more control as a facilitator to the learners. And I remember when I was first beginning, it was that level of precision. But oftentimes, yeah, I mean, yes, it's fun to have a little twist to a simple activity, but it's
mm,
oftentimes those incredibly simple ones that where you're like, oh, that's too simple. But then you see it works. Those incredibly well panned, elaborate, interactive things that fall flat, but those incredibly simple human ones where you've given a lot more autonomy and a lot more back to the learners, it again comes back to that mantra: trust your
mm,
participants,
mm-hmm.
and it goes somewhere much more interesting.
Yeah, let them, like, how much am I deciding to lead because it's easier and faster? How, how
Mm.
much could I decide to let go of that and just say, wait, maybe if I'm not worried about easy and about time as much as we often are, what would happen if I let it be more about what you need to do? and how
Mm,
you're working through it. And then, let me look at these features that are within whatever platform I'm using and say, how do I let people see each other? How do I let people talk with one another? A lot of these platforms default to everybody muted, participant list hidden, privacy concerns and all these things.
yeah.
And I'm okay. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful about privacy, because certainly
No.
that's important. But when we're learning, though, how do we probably need like an open learning environment. And so how do we get these technologies to let it be more open, and let people know before they come, we're going to have an open thing happen here. And as a result, we'll be able to have the kind of experiences that you're used to having when we were in person. But on that note, though, about speaking about in person, and what you just said made me think of something. When I
Mm,
do speak in person, which has been quite a while at this point,
yeah,
but when I
exactly.
do, I often feel like I feel sort of awkward, because I'm so used to being online and so used to letting participants do more, that there's this other side of when you've been doing virtual facilitation for as long as I have, it becomes, I feel like the things in person are lacking. Like, I just do not trust what your nonverbal communication is telling me. I want you to type in some sort of chat that I don't have floating around in a room, It's
Oh my
interesting
goodness.
how the other side of that is starting to impact the way that I present and teach in
It,
person.
it's going in reverse. I have a coachee who's similar, where he was actually leading his teams remotely for the last couple of years, and now of course he's remote again, he's in his happy place. But he was actually getting coaching because he was suddenly having to lead people face to face, and he just couldn't figure out how to do it. He's like, I understand how to
Right.
do this perfectly remotely, but I've actually lost the ability to do this in a face to face environment.
I
So
can relate.
he's liking lockdown. He's like, this is great, I'm back. I'm like, no, you're going back to your comfort zone. So
It's great.
have there been any sessions or anything that stuck out in the last couple months, in either what you've delivered or what you've seen? Because I know we've had the ATD conference recently. We've had a bunch of other events recently with William Thalmeyer and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot going on in the space. Has there been anything that really stuck out to you? You're like, oh, that's actually really interesting what people are doing there, or really strange? Either way, it doesn't matter.
Um, just that would be different than the last few years. I
Yeah,
think, just like the fact that so many more people are open and accepting. Um, it's just a flood. It's what everyone's been doing. And so seeing how everyone is doing it is so interesting to me. I think, a lot of, there's a lot of mindset that has been changed, and I could say that I've worked a lot in that space,
mm,
helping people recognize that this will be okay. We can do this. We can be successful. And so now you have, okay, we know it works now. And then people trying to figure it out. And I do find it kind of interesting what people are accepting at this point in time, in terms of like how we should
yeah.
look and how we should act. And there is an informality that's finally being accepted that
I kind
before
of like
wouldn't
that.
have been. I like it too, although I like it to the extent that I don't want it to cross over the line into disrespectful.
No,
Just because we work from home, it's why we would never bother to look nice on camera.
well,
That that thing's a bit
you
weird
got the
to me.
cool like
Yeah.
a red background and painting, so it's definitely framed well. I'm cheating with a
Thanks.
virtual background with the
It
Amadeus Mozart opera background. So
looks great. It looks
we're,
great.
we're we're going for the drama. We're going for the
Mhm.
drama at this time of night. So you got to do that.
Mhm.
Excellent.
I love it.
Well, I was just because I'm being very mindful of our coming up on our half an hour. Just wanted to don't want to overdo. It's always
Mhm.
those like I always love the podcast. I'm watching a bunch of these interviews and stuff, and around the half an hour mark is where my brain begins to drift off. So it's like
Mhm.
some of them like it's an hour long thing. I'm like, no, keep it to 20 or 30 minutes. Like the best. You get some really interesting questions at the end, but I
I
always like that first half an hour. Yeah, so
I agree.
it's
I'm the same.
it's like Calvin and Hobbes knew when he'd reached the peak and knew when it was time to stop the comic strip. And he's like, no, we're good. This was a good story. It doesn't need to go on for another 30 minutes to no end. But yeah, is there any last advice you would give? Any last advice you would give? I just keep asking you for advice. Apparently, I'm a broken record now. Even though I wrote out like 20 thoughtful questions, we got through some of them. Your book next year. Anything really? Is it just version two of not just version two of Interact Engage, or it's something
Yeah.
else, or is it both?
So Interact and Engage is going to get an update. We're doing that, and that'll come out next year. And
Awesome.
but I have a second book that's a new book, and it is the first book on the role of the producer. And so it's called Producing Virtual Training Meetings and Webinars. And
Finally.
I know, every book that I've written, every article I've written, I always call out the producer and the role of that and learning the technology. And it just occurred to me, what, we really need to have an entire book devoted to the production tasks and the whole production side of virtual training meetings and webinars, because it's a big role. And if it isn't a role, it's a big task. It's a big
Mm.
series of tasks, and so it's from that angle. The book is for training people, and so that they can decide if they are going to hire a producer. Ultimately, I'm hoping that people will read it and realize they should make this a real role and begin to hire for people to do it. It's
And
interesting
get
though,
clients to pay for it. Yeah.
and get clients to pay for it, because a lot of people, how do I get my company to let me have a producer? And I'm just
Mm.
thinking, how did you get your company to have a facilities manager? How did you have somebody built that whole
It's so
office? And
necessary.
so
It's
I'm super excited to have put it together, and I can't wait to see how
well,
the world reacts to that.
well, I mean, it goes right back to your philosophy of focusing on the learners. Is if you're trying to manage all these breakouts, manage all of that. I mean, Daniel Stillman has a wonderful methodology he calls the lazy facilitator, where he's giving them something to do while he's in the background. He's not actually lazy; he's incredibly busy. He's managing
Hmm.
all the breakouts and giving them something to talk about and do. And so he multitasks that way.
Yeah.
But I think it's, for me at least, I'm with you that if we can just be fully present with them in the moment, and trust our facilitator, truly trust our producer to take care of that, it's even better. I'm really
And it's
excited
not
to
that
read
I'm
that.
suggesting, like, the book won't suggest that the facilitator just sit there and talk, because that's not what I believe in at all. But it is a tandem. We do it together. Like,
Mm,
I know how things work and I know how to set it up, but I am still teaching through while my producer sets up who's going into what groups, while my producer makes sure that if anyone's having tech
exactly.
problems, they're getting help, that the poll is ready to go if I'm going to use one. I don't have to be like, hold on, everybody, while I set up all the groups, click, 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 click. And now my brain goes into a different place of, I don't even know what I'm thinking
You're doing
about.
the cognitive drift that, yeah, exactly.
And I'm
So
no
no,
longer thinking about
completely.
what they said. I'm not able to be reflective on,
Mm,
how they're making connections. All those things go away. And so instead of blaming trainers for not being engaging, why don't we look at what they need to be more successful? And I think that comes in the form of having some help on the tech side. So
that sounds
I'm
absolutely spot
excited
on.
for it. I'm so happy to
Me
also be done
too.
writing it.
Oh my God.
So
Yeah.
it's ready to go.
I can fully empathize with that. There's nothing,
Yeah.
it's so fun. You're like, when it comes together visually and stuff, you're like, yes, I never want to look at that ever again. I want to talk
Ever
about it,
again.
but
That's
I
right.
never want to look at that ever again. Well,
That's
I hope
right.
that we all get to look at it very soon. And
Mhm.
thank you so much for all the advice and all the ideas you've been willing to share with us. We will have the links below. Kassy has some incredible resources, a bunch of online webinars and courses. There's a lot of stuff. Go exploring, go get her book. If you're an ATV member, use one of your 2 books a year to get her book. It's also on Amazon and everywhere else. So thank you so much, Kassy, and all the best. Stay healthy and stay awesome.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Joshua.